These are the two most essential components of public speaking and communication that I knew nothing about. I'm ashamed to admit it, but everyone has to learn, right? And I'll tell you the first one. The first one I learned when I was doing public speaking at Toastmasters and I started to make some progress. So I was winning some public speaking contests. I felt great about myself. It was the first time when I got any recognition for anything I was actively good at. So I felt really good about my skills. And then people would invite me and they would say, "Hey, can you come and do a speech here? Can you come and talk to my audience?" And I would happily oblige because I'm such an amazing public speaker. One such event was a Toastmasters club in Vancouver that invited me to come and do a speech for their speech competition. So essentially, what would happen is they wanted me to speak to an audience, and then people would evaluate my speech to practice their evaluation skills. So I said, "Of course, I'm an amazing public speaker. What can they possibly have to say about my speech? Because I'm so amazing. I'm going to go there and I'm going to give them the best speech that they've ever heard." So I show up on the day, and it's a big venue. There's lots of people there, and eventually they call out my name. I walk on stage, and I go into my story. I'm going into a story about how my dad was my tennis coach, and because he was my tennis coach and he was also my dad, we had a strange relationship because I was also afraid of him, but at the same time I was trying to learn from him, and he would have to switch between coach and father and coach and father, and that affected our relationship. So my speech was about that. I finished the speech and people stood up and gave me a standing ovation. "Wow, unbelievable. How did you come up with this? How come you're not competing in the competition? This was so good, so amazing." And I'm taking in the praise. I'm taking in all the claps. Of course, I'm amazing. I'm amazing. Keep telling me this. Now, as people are coming to me after my presentation, after my speech, there's a gentleman I notice standing to the side with his arms folded, a bit of an older gentleman, looks very wise, and he's just looking at me with what I assume to be skepticism. He's looking as if he's to say, "I wasn't really impressed. I want to ask this guy a few questions." And I could sense that. So after everybody else eventually dissipates, this gentleman comes up to me very slowly with a very stoic face. He looks at me and he says, "Hey, Yasser, what was the message of your speech?" And I said, "Well, my speech was about my relationship with my father and how he was my tennis coach and all the turbulence we had in our relationship because we kept going." No, 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 no. My question is, what was the message of your speech? "Yeah, I'm getting into that. So my message was about how, when your parents are also teaching you something, and in my case, my dad was." No, 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 no. What was the message of your speech? Now I'm thinking, is this guy deaf or is he just trying to frustrate me? What is happening? I said, "No, that's what I'm trying to tell you. It was about the relationship with my dad." And he just shakes his head in disappointment. And I'm just thinking, who is this person? What is going on? And then he switches gears and he starts saying things that I don't understand. He says, "Yeah, so let me ask you a question. Let's suppose that you were invited to dinner by someone who's very affluent. What would you go to their place with? Would you take a gift with you? Like, what are these riddles we're doing? I just met you. What is happening?" "Yeah, sure, I'd take a gift." "Okay, what would you take with you?" I don't know, like a box of chocolates." "All right, what kind of chocolates would you take?" "Well, something that's a little fancier. I wouldn't take some Kit Kats. I'd probably go to the store and ask what they have that's good for a dinner." "Okay, amazing. And then how would you package that?" "Well, I would wrap it in a gift wrap, put a bow around it, and then take it to the venue." "Okay, so you've got your chocolates, you've wrapped it up, you show up to their door, they open the door. What happens next?" "Well, I hand them the gift." "Okay, they have the gift. What do they do with it?" "Well, they open the wrapper and then they enjoy the chocolates." "Okay, and what do they do with the wrapper?" "Well, I guess they toss it in the trash, right?" And then he said something I'll never forget. He said, "Exactly. They will toss it in the trash." That's exactly what I did with what you said up there. Because what you gave me was the gift wrap, but you didn't give me the gift. You gave me a story that did not have a message. You gave me a story that did not have a message. So, one of the most important things you need to have in communication is a clear message. If you can't define the message to me in one sentence, in 10 words or less, you don't have a clear message. Now, I'm sitting there stunned because this guy just tore me apart, but I'm also thinking, who are you? I didn't ask you for your advice. And then he says, follow me for a second. He walks me over to a whiteboard and he draws a circle, and he writes 10 in that circle. And he says, next time you write a speech, before you even think of the story, I want you to write down one clear message in one sentence that is 10 words or less. It could be something like, what got you here won't get you there. Always believe in yourself. Never give up. Clear message. Write that message down and then build the story around that message. So your goal is to use that story as a vehicle to deliver the gift being the message. So remember this. One of the most important things to have in all of communication is a clear message. It's only later that I realized his name was Shahrukh Daruwala. He is someone who trains people at the biggest TED stage at TEDx Stanley Park, and he also was one of the top contestants at the Toastmasters public speaking competition. And on top of that, he has trained numerous public speaking contestants who've gone on to the finals of the Toastmasters Championship. So a very, very qualified individual who I very much respect. So remember, point number one, the most important thing is having a clear message. How often have you heard someone talk, and then you have no idea where you're going? I remember my coach, Jeff Torrance, back in the day, he used to tell me a story. He said, let me tell you a story. So I woke up in the morning, right? And then I got into my car, and I wanted to go to work. And then I realized that my car didn't really have any gas in it. So then I had to obviously stop by the gas station. So I stopped by the gas station, and man, the gas prices are so expensive now, but you got to get gas. So I got some gas, finally made it to my workshop, ended up the day there, and I came home, had some dinner, and then went to sleep. And then he would ask me, what was wrong with that story? And I would always say, what was the point? And he said, exactly. This is why you need to have a clear message when you speak. So that's point number one, have a clear and concise message. Point number two is something I learned from stand-up comedy. You see, when I was learning stand-up comedy, I was so used to giving a speech, just getting up on stage and just talking. And my coach said that, hey, you have to prepare some comedy material. You have to write some jokes. And when you write the jokes, you have to come onto the stage and talk about those jokes. So I said, great. I wrote down 5 minutes worth of material. But then when I would go on stage, I would sound very robotic because I would read the punchline the way I wrote it, and then I would read the premise the way I would write it, and I was so concerned with just getting the words out. I was so concerned on making sure the line sounds good that for whatever reason, even though the line was good, people wouldn't laugh. And I'm thinking, man, this was pretty funny when I wrote it. It's very clever. It's very creative. Why are people not laughing? And then I was watching some videos on YouTube trying to address this problem, and I came across a fellow named Greg Dean, who's the author of a book called Step by Step to Stand-Up Comedy, if I'm not mistaken. Fantastic book. Highly recommend you pick it up. And he said, what is the number one most important thing in comedy? Or what is the number one most important thing when you're on stage? And that is your relationship with the audience. I'll say that again. The number one most important thing is your relationship with the audience, because you can have the best message, you can have the best jokes, but if the audience doesn't like you, if they don't trust you in the moment, they don't care what you're saying. So the number one most important thing is your relationship with the audience. Now, how did this come to light in my situation? Well, because when I was on stage, I was not trying to build a relationship with the audience. I was just trying to say the material that I wrote down. So I was there for myself. I was there just because I wanted to say what's on the page. I didn't want to build a relationship with the audience. So if I said, hey, this is my premise of the joke, this is my punchline of the joke, I'm not really talking to anyone. I'm just reading. And it's very hard to build a relationship with the audience when you're reading. So he told me you have to make it more conversational. You have to get people to really pay attention to what you're saying. So I'll give you a quick example. I'm gonna do the right version of it first and the wrong version later. So I had a joke last week in class where I stepped on stage and I said, "Hey folks, I've been reading a lot of news. Anyone here reads a lot of news?" And some people said, "Yeah, I read a lot of news." I said, "Great." One of the things that I read was that NASA, I don't know if you read this, NASA announced that they just discovered a black hole that is 33 times the mass of the sun. Can you believe that? 33 times the mass of the sun. They're calling it Gaia, and it's the second biggest black hole in the Milky Way, the second biggest black hole. The first biggest black hole, obviously, being TikTok. And then everyone just started laughing after that. But here's the funny thing. The first time I said that joke, this is how I said it. Did you know scientists discovered a black hole that is 33 times the mass of the sun? It is the second biggest black hole, the first being TikTok. It's the same material, but it sounds so written and it sounds so scripted that it's just not funny. So this is why when you are presenting or you're on stage and you are just reading your notes, you are just reading the slides, and you are not interacting with the audience, you lose the relationship with the audience. Because what are you there to do? We are on stage to deliver a message, to change someone's behavior, to influence their thoughts for the better. And we can't do that if we are so attached to our performance. Now, sometimes, yes, if the story is so powerful, it can just be read out. But if you really want them to connect with you as a person and not just the words you have, remember this. The relationship with the audience is what's most important. And the way you do that, you know what you're going to talk about, but you don't read it word for word. Or if you are going to read it, you look down, you read what it is, and then you say it in a conversational tone. And then you look back at the notes, and then you look at the audience and you do it that way. That way, you are still engaging with the audience, you're still building a relationship. So those are two of the most important lessons that I have learned. Number one, your message needs to be clear and concise. Clear and concise message, and then you build a story around that. Number two, the most important thing when you're on stage is your relationship with the audience. So don't try to perform, don't try to memorize all the material, because then you're doing it for you and not the audience. So do those two things and you'll be an excellent communicator. Now, if you do want to practice your public speaking and communication, go to freespeakingtips.com. I send you a ton of resources every single week, including courses and training that you can use to practice your public speaking, including a 10-day free speaking course where every day you get an assignment to practice your public speaking. So hopefully you enjoyed this episode. If you did, tune in for the next one. I'll see you then. Take care.